What is the greatest fricate? I'll do it myself in history. Jonas Salk needed human subjects to test his polio vaccine. That's normally a long process and he wanted to make the vaccine available as quick as possible, so he just experimented on himself. He also didn't patent the polio vaccine, I believe, and he tried to help fight the AIDS epidemic even before he died. Canadian soldier Leo Major and his friend Willie Arsenault were scouting a Dutch town called Zwolle that had been captured by Germans in World War II. On this scouting trip, the two had decided to liberate Zwolle together, but were spotted and Arsenault was killed. Major, enraged, killed 2 Germans while the rest fled. On the outskirts of the town, Major intercepted a vehicle, disarming the soldiers there. He told a French-speaking soldier that all the Canadian artillery would be firing on the town in the morning, and decidedly let the Nazi free to spread the rumor, even returning his weapon as a total alpha move. That night, Major decided to single-handedly liberate the town. Arming himself with many weapons, he made explosions and noise, making it sound like the entire Canadian army was there. Several times at night, Major went back and forth from Zwolle to the Canadian base, taking 8 to 10 German prisoners each time. At one point, Major located the Gestapo, high-ranking Nazis, headquarters and raided it himself. He killed several SS officers and the rest fled. By morning, Major discovered that the Germans who had taken Zwolle had entirely retreated. I should also mention that Major was a sniper who had only one eye from a phosphorus grenade explosion years prior and remained in the military because he insisted he only needed one eye to aim his weapon, and that to him, he looked like a pirate. The Dutch town of Zwolle was liberated by a one-eyed sniper. He has several other legendary acts, but this to me was his best. Otis invented pretty much what we consider the modern elevator. Nobody was convinced it was safe, so he hoisted himself up extremely high and had somebody cut the cable with an axe to prove how confident he was that the elevator was safe regardless of almost worst case scenarios. Otis UK are based in Reading. When they answer the phone they say hello, Otis Reading. In 1888, Alman Brown Strowger, an undertaker, noticed he was losing a lot of business to the other undertaker in town. He found out that the other undertaker's wife was a telephone operator, and when she intercepted people asking to be connected to Strowger's funeral home, the operator would route the call to her husband's funeral home instead. 3 years later, Strowger patented the automatic teller exchange, a system which allowed telephone users to make calls without the need for human operators, single-handedly destroying an entire workforce. Imagine being so pissed off you don't just get someone fired, but remove their job from existence entirely. Cliff Stoll, the cuckoo's egg, noticed weird traffic on his university servers. No one believed him that there was any risk occurring. Ended up uncovering a major hacking attempt to steal missile designs and basically created internet security. I think it was missile designs. It's been a long time. Jon Snow, not that one, the father of epidemiology. No one believed him that the cholera outbreak in what is now Soho was because of a contaminated water pump. He broke it. They arrested him for vandalism and held him until the outbreak suddenly ended. He was also a pioneer when it came to anesthetics. Queen Victoria permitted him to put her under for the birth of 2 of her children. I visited his memorial in Brompton Cemetery a few years ago. He's right round the corner from Emmeline Pankhurst's grave. Both sites had fresh flowers on them. Donald Knuth is one of the big names in computer science. Back in the 1960s he set out to write the definitive texts on computer programming and analysis of algorithms. The first 3 volumes came out and he started the 4th in the early mid-1970s. He was unhappy with how the newer printing editions were typeset, and so he took a summer to solve that problem. A decade later the 4th volume still had not been completed, but as a consolation prize we got TeX, later extended to the more commonly used LaTeX. Without question the most comprehensive and powerful language for creating documents with heavy technical requirements, it is a strange mix of a markup language like HTML and a compiled language like C. It is completely free and has been for well over 30 years and is probably the most bug-free piece of software I've ever seen. Certainly for its size and scope, there's not much out there of comparable quality. There is literally no mathematics that cannot be properly typeset in TeX LaTeX. Its default style is instantly recognizable to any working mathematician. It is used across nearly all STEM fields, and there are hundreds, if not thousands, of journals that only accept manuscripts written in LaTeX. It wasn't until the early 2000s that drafts of the 4th volume started to appear. Nobody has seemed to mind. Probably the time Nando Pirado and Roberto Canessa decided they couldn't wait around any longer and legged it for 10 days across the Andes with no warm clothes, climbing gear, or food except some scraps of their dead friends stuffed into a sock. They finally found someone out in the middle of nowhere, Sergio Catalan, who rode horseback all night and then took a bus to get some help. The mountain climbers had come from the wreckage of a crashed plane that everyone had been looking for over 2 months. They needed help for the other survivors who were injured and starving. They saved 14 of their friends. Morris Hillman invented over 40 vaccines during his career in the pharmaceutical industry. In 1963, his oldest daughter caught the mumps. He cultured a sample from her, developed a vaccine, and injected it into his younger daughter. That vaccine is still in use and has saved millions of lives. In total, it's estimated that his work has saved 118 million lives globally. And because he used it on his daughter, it is to this day the fastest any effective vaccine has ever been produced. The guy who started FedEx wrote a college paper about a nationwide overnight shipping company and got a C, started the company anyways. Later, after he started it and it was struggling, he couldn't get a loan and the company was almost bankrupt, and he bet next week's payroll at the casino on roulette and won. Also got a silver star in the Vietnam War and now co-owns the Washington Redskins, the latter often viewed as the biggest failure in his life. It was blackjack, not roulette. Leo Major, he liberated an entire village from Nazis by himself. He's one of the handful of super badass soldiers you sometimes hear about from World War II. I'm surprised no one's mentioned Catherine the Great of Russia. She decided her husband was useless, which, granted, he was, and proceeded to set up a military coup to overthrow him. Even with the plan being discovered early, she dressed herself in military garb and marched with her new army, which had just sworn loyalty to her, down to Peter's palace, where he was forced to resign the throne, all without a single drop of blood shed, at least until Peter turned up dead some time later under shady circumstances. But honestly, for a military coup it was pretty non-violent. If saying "frick it, I'm ruling Russia myself" isn't great, I dunno what is. I mean, it's right there next to her name for a reason. It's incredible, especially considering A. She's a lady, B. She wasn't Russian, C. She wasn't originally Russian Orthodox. Not a very old story. Manjhiol the mountain man lived in a very remote village of India whose route to nearby was blocked a mountain, and hence villagers had to climb it every time. And they had to do that daily to get essential supplies. During one of these trips, his wife fell down the mountain. He loved her a lot. He tried first to persuade the gov to do a mountain tunnel project there, but to vain. So he went on alone to break the entire mountain with just an axe. He did that for 10 plus years and finally succeeded. There is a Bollywood movie on him too. Title: Manji, the Mountain Man. I feel like he went through a lot of axes, lol. That's pretty impressive though. Nikola Tesla was tasked with lighting up the World's Fair, but Thomas Edison wouldn't allow him to use any of his patents, so Tesla had to invent a new light bulb that didn't use any of Edison's patents and could still have thousands made in time for the event. Tesla was definitely one of the most underrated geniuses of his time. I believe he died penniless in 1943. Desmond Doss single-handedly saved from 50 to 100 men up on Hacksaw Ridge in Okinawa. His company was ordered to retreat when they were attacked by the Japanese, but instead he said nah, stayed up on the ridge alone, unarmed, and dragged as many soldiers as he could to safety without any help. Even when he was shot by a sniper and riddled with shrapnel, he made sure they took another guy down the hillside before him. Australian stretcher bearer Leslie Allen did a similar thing on Mount Tambu. Carried out 12 men one at a time on his back alone, received a Silver Star. James Clerk Maxwell was idolized by Einstein as being the father of modern physics. Not only did he formulate the classical theory of electromagnetic radiation, but just for shoots and giggles he calculated exactly what Saturn's rings were made from using pure mathematics. It wasn't until Voyager 1 and 2 passed by and took photos in the early 80s did we get confirmation that Maxwell was right. He then calculated how to take a color photograph in 1855. This was then achieved in 1861 and is recognized as the first ever color photograph. Don't forget his advances in statistical mechanics. Juan Pujol Garcia was a Spaniard who created his own counterintelligence operation for the Allies during World War II. Initially, he approached British and American intelligence to offer them his services, but both countries rebuffed him. Undeterred, Garcia created a fictional persona as a pro-fascist Spanish official and got himself recruited by the Nazis, who directed him to travel to Britain to recruit agents. Instead, Garcia created a network of fictitious agents and sub-agents using publicly available information like newspapers and travel brochures. It was at this point that he again contacted Allied intelligence, and he was finally recruited. Garcia continued his work throughout the war, and for the same operation, he received both a knighthood from the British and the Iron Cross from Nazi Germany. The Nazis never realized that he was a double agent. In 1947, a guy named Thor Heyerdahl was trying to prove his theory that the Polynesian islands were settled by people from South America, not Asia. Nobody believed him because it was thought that crossing such a large ocean with the technology they had back then was impossible. So he decides to build a boat using only the tools and materials available at the time these migrations took place. And then he sailed that boat across the Pacific Ocean, nearly dying in the process, but ultimately making it to the Polynesian islands. The first thing that comes to thought here is the Louisiana Purchase. Congress planned on buying a small piece of the available land, but Jefferson used some interpretation fuckery to double the size of the US without congressional approval. A man who was a tractor mechanic company owner made a good chunk of money and bought a Ferrari. He felt that the car wasn't as good as it could be, and it wasn't very comfortable, so he brought his complaints all the way to Enzo Ferrari, the owner of the company. Enzo insulted the man, saying a mere tractor mechanic didn't know how to make a sports car. That sparked a rivalry that lasts to this day. That man was Ferruccio Lamborghini. During the American Revolution, John Paul Jones sailed over to England to burn down British naval ships. He succeeded, of course, and made back safely. After the revolution, he was even pardoned by the town that he burned most of the ships in. And then he met Jimmy Page and Robert Plant, and the rest is history. Perhaps when no one believed Barry Marshall that H. pylori can cause stomach ulcers, so he thought, screw it, I'll test it on myself, and ended up getting the Nobel Prize. Bless him. I have an ulcer, and because of him we have a better understanding of how to treat it. Leonid Rogozov removing his own appendix, or Ines Ramirez Perez doing her own C-section. Rogozov was a Dr. Perez a poor Mexican woman. Metallica fired Dave Mustaine, 1983, because he was sort of a control freak and wanted to take the band in a more prog jazz metal direction. He was also abusing drugs and was known for violent behavior at the time. He went off and created his own band Megadeth, and over the next 30 plus years he sold millions of albums and toured the whole world, writing and controlling pretty much everything he's ever wanted. It seems they've all now patched things up. Dude is an absolute genius beast of a guitarist-songwriter. Also, when guitarist Hillel Slovak died, 1988, John Frusciante was a 19-year-old kid and a huge fan of the Red Hot Chili Peppers. He was heartbroken and didn't want to see the end of his favorite band, so he went and auditioned to play a lead guitar. He got the gig, helped take them to the top of the charts. The rest is history. Today he's considered one of the greatest rock guitarists out there. I do love Megadeth, but I wouldn't want to be in a band with Dave Mustaine. It's a weird win-win-win situation. Metallica didn't have to deal with Dave. Dave got to go and be Dave, and we got to enjoy both Metallica and Megadeth. Martine Rothblatt, founder of SiriusXM and Unbelievable Polymath, was told her daughter Genesis had 3 months to live. She had been diagnosed with a type of pulmonary arterial hypertension which was fatal. The disease causes too much pressure in the blood vessels leading from the heart to the lungs, causing them to narrow and not carry enough oxygen. So Rothblatt quit all of her other work and went to the library to save her daughter. Even though she had zero background in the field, she figured out a cure and in the process founded United Therapeutics, which is a $1 billion biotechnology company. Rothblatt's life story is amazing. Marie Curie, Polish French chemist and physicist who, without going into great detail, died of constant exposure to radiation while seeking a cure for others, more or less sacrificed herself as a human guinea pig, knowing full well the consequences of her actions. Here in Scotland we have many Marie Curie charity shops who provide funds for hospices and the like. I'm pretty sure she's responsible for saving my butt and many countless others for her pioneering works. Was quoted in July 1912 as saying, "Frick it, I'll do it myself." Allegedly. Clara Lemlich taking the stage at a union meeting in 1909 to declare a general strike after the older male union leaders told the working girls that there really wasn't a point in striking and it would be too hard. Just be patient and deal with it. So 20-year-old Clara interrupts them, climbs up on the stage, and shouts at the crowd that she's tired of just talk. Time to strike. And everyone went for it. Instant agreement of the workers. Closest I can think of is Erwin Rommel during the Blitzkrieg seeing an opportunity to make an exploit and instead of waiting said frick it and charged 200 miles into French territory. Which is interesting since in World War I the German leader, can't remember his name, pushed beyond where he was supposed to since the French resistance sucked, but it partially cost them the war for overextending. The Soviet woman that lost her husband to the Nazis sold everything and to pay for a tank with the request that she gets to drive it to fight Nazis. Go read up about Maria Oktyabrskaya on Wikipedia. When Sony and Nintendo partnered for a CD add-on for the SNES, but Nintendo decided to partner with Philips instead, leaving Sony behind. Sony took all the knowledge about video games that they learned from working with Nintendo and created the PlayStation. All the while Nintendo was still buying the sound chips for the SNES from Sony. George Clooney bought his own spy satellite to prove the alleged crimes of an African warlords because nobody else would. He bought satellite time, not an entire spy satellite. Sir Ranulph Fiennes after an expedition, I think to the Arctic, had frostbitten digits on one hand. After becoming irritated and uncomfortable waiting for the docs to sort out treatment, he went to his garden shed and amputated them himself. Here's a notable mention, albeit somewhat obscure. Sam Regenstrief once made 40% of the dishwashers in the USA at the time. He fell ill with a kidney stone and went to his local hospital in Indiana. Upon leaving, he was disgusted by the waiting times and quality of care. He took matters into his own hands and created a hospital and founded the Regenstrief Institute. This institute helped map the genome of COVID-19 and translated its finding into 20+ languages, helping the world fight this virus. Henry Ford proposed to buy Ferrari so that Ford could be competitive in the performance car market. The deal was about to be signed, but Enzo only wanted to sell the commercial Ferrari division and not the racing arm. So Henry Ford said frick it, and thus was born the Ford GT40. Ferrari is pretty much the reason two other sports car companies exist. Wasn't there that Russian, of course he was Russian, doctor that did stomach surgery on himself, with only a bottle of vodka for an aesthetic? He was stuck in Antarctica and was the only doctor available. He got a group of people to hold mirrors and hand him stuff and had another group for if anyone passed out. He then took out his own appendix. During the American Civil War, General McClellan was in charge of the Army of the Potomac. He was an overcautious kind of officer, and he wasn't doing enough to move against Lee's Army of Northern Virginia. Lincoln got fed up with the inaction and wrote him a letter in which he asked his general if he could borrow the army, since you're not using it for anything. Stanislav Petrov making the decision not to push the button to launch nuclear missiles, as would have been his direct orders when the Russian early warning system wrongly indicated the launch of American missiles in 1983. One man saved the entire world from nuclear destruction. So this is undeniably the greatest of these moments in all human history. There should be a statue of him in every major city around the world. General Vladimir Karpovich Pikolov was in charge of the chemical troops of the Soviet Union during the Chernobyl incident. When asked to get one of his men to get a reading of the radiation levels inside the reactor, he said he'll just do it himself. Fun fact, not only he survived the radiation until 2003 where he died normally, he also survived 3 of the deadliest battles in the Russian front during World War II. Maria Vasilyevna Oktyabrskaya, otherwise known as the fighting girlfriend, sold all of her possessions to buy and donate a tank to the Soviet Union after the death of her husband in 1941. She requested and was allowed by the army to let her drive the T-34 she promptly named the fighting girlfriend. Oktyabrskaya proved her ability and bravery in battle, and was promoted to the rank of sergeant. Unfortunately, she later died in 1944 due to wounds she suffered from in battle. She was later given the title of Hero of the Soviet Union, the highest honor any Soviet soldier could earn. Maria was one of 2 female drivers to earn the title. Dashrath Manji the Mountain Man. Dude carved a way through a mountain single-handedly to pave a shorter way to a hospital because his wife died due to the lack of treatment after falling from the same mountain. It took him 22 years. The authorities did not react, so he did. This happened in rural India and there's a movie about him. For the last track of Thor album Innuendo, Queen was arguing about if Freddie Mercury was healthy enough to sing. May states, "I said, Fred, I don't know if this is going to be possible to sing." And he went, "I'll freaking do it." Darling, he put his vodka down and recorded the entire song in one take. Reading this I was like, this has to be the show must go on. And happily it was. Amazing track, holy heck. Prince single-handedly wrote, produced, and played all the instruments and his own vocals of Purple Rain. He did it by playing each instrument all the way through while recording each layer of instrumentals over each other, then editing all of them in one track with his vocals as the final touch. During the invasion of Germany, General Patton was told not to take Trier, as it would require 4 divisions and not be worth the time manpower. He sent a message back saying, "Have taken Trier with 2 divisions. What do you want me to do? Give it back." Tommy Wiseau couldn't land an acting job in Hollywood, so he wrote, produced, directed, and starred in his own movie despite having no experience in any of those things. The rest is history. Alfred Wegener. No one believed him that the continents were once together. Pangaea. So he did his own research and died in a blizzard in Greenland. And only 30 years after he died a new idea came to life. Plate tectonics and continental drift. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. The Black Hand Gang came up with a meticulous way to assassinate the Duke as he toured the city. After one bomb being thrown and missed, the assailant trying to commit suicide in a puddle, the leader of the gang eventually shot the Archduke himself after stopping for a sandwich. And that's how we got Tentacle P. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.